Hey guys, this is Sarah and today I am doing my top 14 books of 2014. So the year is coming to an end and I've read so many good books this year. I was looking through my list because when I decided that I was going to make this video, I started writing down a list besides on Goodreads of the books I read. And I have read 94 books, exceeding my Goodreads challenge of 90, which I was very proud of myself for. The grand majority of them were 5-star books. I don't know if that's just me being generous or the fact that I got to read a lot of good books this year, but I'll definitely be thinking about that for the next year. So out of these 94, possibly 96 books, because December is not over yet and I'm still reading, I have picked 14 books, because I can't pick a round number, that I enjoyed immensely, that I feel are the best books that I read this year. Most people say their books are in no particular order, but mine most definitely are. It goes from not least favorite, because all of them are favorites, there's a reason they're on this list, but from, let's say, least impactful on my being to most impactful, meaning that I enjoyed all of them. They're all 5-star reviews, but some of them hit me in my heart, in my feels more than others, depending on their stance in this top 14 number. Before we start, I just like to say I'm not going to describe the plot too much because there are 14 books, but I will be leaving all the Goodreads links down below so you can check out the books and read the synopsis for yourself to see if you want to check any of these out. Without further ado, let's get started. In spot number 14 is Boyfriends with Girlfriends by Alex Sanchez. I read this book in June before I started my booktube channel, and it's a realistic fiction, romance, contemporary, LGBT, young adult novel. It's about these 4 people, 2 boys and 2 girls, all in different moments in their sexuality. We have a bisexual boy, a gay boy, a straight girl, and a lesbian girl, and how these 4 interact and slowly but surely learn about themselves and learn to discover their sexuality beyond what they think it is. Really enjoyed this book. I thought the 4 facets of what is seemingly the most common gender sexualities that exist was very interesting, especially in young adult characters. How these characters each grow individually, even though they're all working together, was very interesting. In spot number 13 is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This was the first book I read this year, and I read it in April, before I started my booktube channel. And this is a coming-of-age contemporary about this guy named Charlie who is talking to someone about his life. Obviously this book is very popular. I'm sure you've heard of it and read it or seen the movie, and there's nothing I can describe that other people haven't said. It touched me a lot. I really enjoyed it. I read this sort of kind of with 2 of my best friends. We all decided to read it. One of them had reread it so we could all talk about it, because we realized how book nerdy we all were together, and it was really fun to finish it and then just discuss it with them. So that's one of the reasons that it made it on my list. In spot number 12 is Percy Jackson's Greek Gods by Rick Riordan. I read this in September, the month I started my booktube channel. Although it wasn't on my TBR, I definitely enjoyed it. I think it came out that same month or the month before that. I'm not very sure. I don't remember that one. It's been 4 months. And this is about Percy Jackson from the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, talking about the Olympic gods and sharing some of their myths and stories. I absolutely adore mythology, and to have it being narrated by a character who's so funny was very refreshing to see so many myths that I've read before, that I've heard of before, and some new ones be described and making it so much fun. In spot number 11 is United We Spy by Ali Carter. This is the last book in the Gallagher Girls series, and I read this in August. Again, before I started my booktube channel, I marathoned the whole series, and I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it was a great way to bring this whole story together. It's a contemporary mystery thriller that includes espionage because it's about an academy where it teaches girls how to be spies. How cool is that? Ali Carter is one of my favorite authors, and I'm so excited for her new series to come out, which I will talk more in my most anticipated books of 2015. In spot number 10 is Rumble by Ellen Hopkins. I read this in September as part of the Booksplosion read-along. It was the Booksplosion Book of the Month that month, and it was my first Ellen Hopkins book, and I really enjoyed it. If you have not heard of Ellen Hopkins, she is a person who writes in free verse, which means you're reading more like a huge novel of connected poetry. And I really enjoyed the writing style. I thought it was very interesting. Although her books are very thick, her writing style make it it helps you fly through it and absorb the story in a different way. This book is a contemporary with a little bit of romance that deals with LGBT issues and effects of suicide. All her books are pretty intense. They have really heavy subject matter. If you would like to try one of her books, I suggest this one. It's not as heavy as I've heard her other books to be, and I really enjoyed that because I've always seen her books in Barnes & Noble, and I've been very scared to read them because I know that they're so heavy, and I love that this one still deals with a lot of subject that's heavy and difficult to deal with, but it's a little lighter than her usual, so it's a good introduction to her writing. In spot number 9 is The Earth, My Butt, and Other Big Rotten Things by Carolyn Mackler. I read this in June before BookTube, and it's a contemporary coming-of-age romance about this girl who is sort of like the sore thumb in her family. Sort of like the odd one out. And it talks about her coming to terms with her body image, her school life, her family, and her relationships, and I really enjoyed the character development throughout this book. I think I mentioned it in one of my past videos, how much I adored her growth in this book, and that's one of the reasons why it ranks so high in this video. In spot number 8 is Animate Me by Ruth Clampett. I read this in May before BookTube, and this is a pulled to publish fan fiction book. I talked about it in my introduction video that I would be reading this because of this book. I got inspired by this book to read more. It basically means that it was a fan fiction, which then sort of transformed, got new characters, got new things added to it and or changed, and then was published as an original novel. This is an adult contemporary romance about this animator and his sort of manager, boss type person, and they deal with some stuff in the office, and they kind of get to know each other better, and it's sort of like, it's basically a love story between these two characters, but it's something very cute and quirky the way they fall in love. Because he's an animator, he draws on her coffee cup. You can tell by the cover that that part of the book is very important, and this was the first adult book that I read in an effort to read more this year, and I really enjoyed it, and that is why it's on my list. In spot number 7 is How to Fall in Love by Cecilia Ahern. I read this book in December. It was on my TBR in November, and I finished reading it in December. This is a adult contemporary romance novel that deals with mental health issues and suicide as well. If you'd like to know more about my thoughts on this book, I have a video review that I will link down in the description box. In spot number 6 is The Blood of Olympus by Rick Riordan. I read this in October as soon as it came out. This is obviously the last book in the Heroes of Olympus series. If you have not heard of this, where have you been? You're obviously on BookTube. How did you not hear about it? If you'd like to see all my fangirly thoughts about this ending of a series, I'll put my book review in the description box. But again, it's basically just me falling in love with the book. Please remember that I am talking about the last book in a series. If you have not read it, don't purposely spoil yourself. I love for you to watch my videos, but don't spoil yourself. Read it, it's awesome, and then go watch my video. Moving on to spot number 5 is Splinter by A.G. Howard. I read this in October as well, and this is a paranormal fantasy retelling of Alice in Wonderland. It's very creepy, it's very gruesome, it's very dysfunctional. Definitely not what the original Alice in Wonderland is. I absolutely adore this series. I'm so incredibly in love with it. The next book comes out in January and I am so pumped. If you'd like to see my thoughts on this book, I'll also be leaving a link to my review in the description box. In spot number 4 is Welcome to the Dark House by Lori Faris Stollers. I read this book in October and it's a contemporary horror thriller. I was actually very nervous to read this book. I left it until the end of October, which did not work out for me because I ended up finishing it during Halloween and it freaked me out. But Lori Faris Stollers is one of my favorite authors and I was like, I'm gonna put my trust in her hands and go with it, and I'm so glad I did. I absolutely adore this book. I have a full review of it and my Goodreads page, which will be linked in the description box. Top 3 books that I read this year. In spot number 3 is Falling Into Place by Amy Zhang. I read this in November and I absolutely adored this book. It's a contemporary realistic fiction which deals with mental health and suicide and the effects that suicide have on the people in that victim's life. I have a non-spoiler book review where I talk about my absolute adoration for this book. I will leave that link also in the description box. In spot number 2 is Vicious by B.E. Schwab. I read this in October as part of Little Book Owl's Little Book Club Book of the Month. And this is paranormal fantasy dealing with people with extra powers. So we're like super-powered humans. I adored this book so much. It looks at a much darker side to what we call superheroes. If you'd like to see all of my thoughts on this book, there's also a book review, and I'll leave that link in the description box, obviously. And my favorite book of entire year in spot number 1 is, if you don't know this already, you obviously are new to my channel, Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sanz. I read this book in November for the Anti-Bullying Readathon hosted by Sarah Churchill, and I am so in love with it. I was so connected to this book. I cried, and it's just so good. It's a young adult contemporary historical fiction romance which deals with LGBT issues. It's about 2 Latino boys and their relationship in the 1980s. I mean, it's so good. I have a full review on Goodreads if you'd like to read it. I hope you guys liked this video. Let me know your favorite books of this year. Let me know if you've read any of the ones I read. Let me know your thoughts on them, if you liked them, if you didn't like them. Let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!